the ruthless king of Deadwood's hell. In the heart of the American frontier, before laws took hold and sheriffs ruled with badges and bullets, there stood a man who needed neither. He didn't wear a star or carry justice. He carried power, fear, and blood. His name? Swearengen. To some, he was a businessman, to others, a devil in human skin. His empire wasn't built with bricks, it was built with broken bodies and shattered souls. In the lawless mining town of Deadwood, South Dakota, Al didn't just run the streets, he owned them. This is the shocking true story of a man who turned prostitution, violence, and human suffering into a kingdom of gold. A story soaked in whiskey, sin, and blood. The boy from Iowa, Swearengen, wasn't born with a gun in his hand, or evil in his heart, but life shaped him into something dark. Born Ellis Albert Swearengen on July 8, 1845 in Oskaloosa, Iowa, he was one of 8 children. The Swearengens were dirt poor, immigrants scraping out a life in a rough America. His father was strict and often cruel, and Al learned early that kindness got you nowhere. As a teen, he developed a silver tongue and a taste for control. He wasn't a brute who beat his way through life. He manipulated, he charmed, and when that didn't work, he threatened. He was sharp, street smart, and had one goal: rise above everyone else. By the time he was in his early 20s, the world was changing fast. The Civil War had left the nation bleeding, and the West was wide open. Lawlessness wasn't a problem in Al's eyes. It was an opportunity, and he would seize it with both hands. Deadwood, city of gold, city of sin, in 1876, a gold strike in the Black Hills of South Dakota created an instant boomtown, Deadwood. There was no law, no order, just opportunity and chaos. And where there is gold, there are men. And where there are men, there is hunger for drink, women, and entertainment. Swearengen saw this chaos as a blank canvas. He arrived that same year and wasted no time. He opened a bar called the Gem Theater. But this wasn't a theater in any traditional sense. It was a saloon, a brothel, and a trap, all wrapped in one glittering facade. The Gem was located on the main thoroughfare of Deadwood, promising escape, ecstasy, and oblivion. Miners would stagger in, covered in dust and gold fever, only to leave with empty pockets and empty souls. But the true horror of the Gem Theater wasn't in its drunken brawls or gambling tables. It was what happened in the back rooms, far from the music and laughter. That was where Swearengen committed his darkest crimes. The Gem Theater, a palace of pain, Al didn't just run a brothel. He ran a system of human trafficking. Young women, often teenagers, were recruited under false pretenses. Al or his men would find them in cities and towns across the Midwest, promising jobs as cooks, performers, or housemaids. Desperate and poor, they followed the promise westward. What awaited them in Deadwood was a nightmare. At the Gem, they were stripped of dignity and choice. Their names were changed, their pasts erased. They were beaten, isolated, and forced to service dozens of clients a night. If they resisted, they were punished. If they ran, they were hunted. Al kept meticulous records. He knew each girl's worth down to the cent. He profited from their suffering and made sure they were always too scared or too broken to fight back. He used drugs to keep them compliant, alcohol to keep them numb, violence to keep them silent. The Gem became the most profitable establishment in Deadwood and possibly the most evil. Violence as policy, Swearengen didn't believe in subtlety. If someone crossed him, they paid. Bloodily. He had a crew of loyal enforcers, thugs who did his bidding without hesitation, bouncers who did more than bounce, bodyguards who did more than guard. Every fist, every blade, every pistol served a purpose: protect the empire. Rival saloons were burned to the ground, Competitors were found dead in alleys. Even customers who refused to pay were dragged out back and beaten until they couldn't walk. Rumors spread that Al had men murdered and buried on the edge of town where no one would ever find them. He bribed officials, controlled judges, bought silence with coins and bullets. Women who tried to escape were made examples of. Some were mutilated. Others were tossed into the street, broken and humiliated. The message was clear. No one left the gem. Al Swearengen didn't rule Deadwood because people loved him. He ruled it because they feared him. Fire, blood, and rebirth. In 1879, a massive fire tore through Deadwood. The Gem Theater was one of the buildings lost to the flames. Many saw it as divine punishment, a cleansing fire to rid the town of its greatest evil. But Swearengen, he saw it as a chance to rebuild. And rebuild he did. The new gem was bigger, more extravagant, and even more dangerous. Al invested heavily, bringing in new women, new games, and new ways to steal from his patrons. Reports say the gem was pulling in $5,000 a night, which would be over $150,000 today. His control over Deadwood tightened. Politicians, lawmen, and businessmen all kissed his ring or risked their lives. Swearengen had become a king in a kingdom of dirt, smoke, and blood. But no empire lasts forever. The end of an empire. As the 1890s arrived, Deadwood began to change. The gold rush was slowing. Law and order were creeping in. The frontier was vanishing. The Gem Theater caught fire again in 1899. This time, Al didn't rebuild. He was older, the town was different, and his power was slipping. He moved to Denver, Colorado, but he was no longer a king. He was a relic, alone, paranoid, and hunted. In 1904, Al Swearengen was found dead in a Denver street. His skull had been cracked open, likely with a blunt weapon. No one was arrested, no one investigated. The man who had ruled Deadwood with violence and fear had been disposed of like garbage. Some say it was revenge. Others say it was justice. Either way, Al Swearengen died as he lived, violently, and surrounded by enemies. Legacy of a monster, today. Al Swearengen is remembered through books, TV shows, and whispered legends. The HBO series Deadwood painted him as a complicated anti-hero, a brutal man shaped by a brutal time. But the truth is far more sinister. Al Swearengen wasn't just a tough businessman. He was a human trafficker, a pimp, and a killer. He built an empire by crushing lives beneath his boots. His hands weren't just dirty, they were drenched in blood. The Gem Theater wasn't just a place of sin. It was a factory of suffering, churning out profit at the cost of human souls. We tell this story not to glorify him, but to remember the victims, to shine a light on what happens when power goes unchecked, when cruelty is rewarded, when fear replaces justice. Because sometimes evil doesn't come with a gun. Sometimes it comes with a grin, a glass of whiskey, and a promise that turns into a prison. This was the story of Al Swearengen, the devil of Deadwood. And in a land without law, he was the law.
The case may be closed, but criminology never sleeps. Like and subscribe at Join Criminology and step deeper into the dark with us.